Thank you, listeners, for joining us for today's Elko Live program here on KELK. So pleased to really kick off the summer season with one of Elko's favorite people. And I say that because not only is she one of my favorites, but everybody knows Jan Petersen. She's our local historian, and she is the director of the Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum, which is a local nonprofit right here in the heart of downtown Elko. Welcome to the program, Jan.
Well, thank you. It's always fun to be here and visit about what's going on in beautiful downtown Elko. I have had more visitors just this short spurt of summer that's coming up. They comment, these out-of-town people, how friendly we are and how nice we are and how helpful we are. And it just makes me feel so good inside to know that these are total strangers who come to Elko with really no expectations. And they're downtown browsing around, and they're charmed by our little quaint town. And
oh, that's great to hear, Jan, because
just love it.
A lot of us have been working really hard to put out the welcome mat, and it was a long, hard couple of years there. And these businesses are working hard on their facades, the improvements, especially in the downtown. And to hear that coming from you, as you said, that's just great news.
Oh, I think it is. And Billy Crapo should be glowing with excitement over
Yes,
it.
she should be very proud. She's the Elko Area Chamber Director, by the way, and works just as hard as Jan does to put our best face out there for the community, for visitors and residents alike.
Well, and I don't think that people in general, residents in general, realize that each one of them is a representative of our community. Whether you're just shopping in the grocery store and you say a friendly word to somebody, not knowing if it's the secret shopper or whoever it is, or if you're in McDonald's working or Walmart working or down at Indigo, we're all representatives of our community, and we all need to keep that friendly face and friendly, open reception to each other.
Kindness matters. It really does.
Kindness matters. Be civil. Be decent.
Yes, Jan, that is great. And especially coming from someone who was born and raised here in Elko. You've seen a lot of changes.
And I have way too much stuff in the garage to leave, so I'm not going soon.
So speaking of putting our best foot forward, and Travel Nevada recognizes Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum as an amazing cultural center devoted to the Great Basin buckaroo. And it's a pretty cool place to be. I mean, this is a one-of-a-kind museum in all of Nevada and probably, throughout the West, frankly.
Well, and my short elevator talk about it is it's cowboy show and tell. So we've got some stuff that is close to 200 years old, early bits and things like that came from some unknown mission and passed down about 12 different ways before we ever got possession of it. But we have representation of all of the major saddle manufacturers around. In fact, our police chief, Ty Troughton, just loaned a saddle from his stepfather. Brought it in yesterday, and it's a Hamley. So it's a noteworthy saddle maker that his stepfather thought that it needed to be displayed. So Ty brought this in, and he's all dressed in his uniform and looking
he's packing
official.
A saddle. Yeah,
packing a saddle.
And that's part of it, too. This is a community effort. There are Western artifacts on display, the saddles and the tack, the leather and the silver. And part of the most important thing, I think, is the history and the legacy, right, Jan, of G.S. Garcia in particular.
Well, and Mr. Garcia was just a regular kind of guy. Came to Elko in Thanksgiving weekend of 1893 with his wife, Nina, and they were just this young married couple. They'd been married about a year and a half, and came here with several trunks full of goods that he had made. He was just a young apprentice in Santa Margarita. Came to sell this stuff, opened it in the parlor of what is now the Stockman's. It was the Mayor Hotel then, and sold out in 2 days. I never thought Black Friday was that old. But he sold out on this stuff, and he was just so impressed, even then, 1893, of the friendliness and the outgoing reception that he had. So we were well established from 1869 as a mining and ranching community. So then he and Sardinina went back home to Santa Margarita, made a bunch more stuff, and moved here permanently in June of 1894 and rented a shop where Ogie Deli is now.
Oh, and the legacy began from that moment forward, and it's turned into so many exciting opportunities, I guess, to preserve this legacy. It really, I think, demonstrates just that hardworking initiative and the pioneer spirit, right?
And that pioneer spirit and that Old West where ranchers help each other out and the community people pitch in and they too are a part of it. It's not an us and them, it's everybody together. That's how you have to be in rural Nevada. You have to draw on yourself, you have to work with each other and cooperate with each other, and you help me and I help you, and we have these big projects that come to fruition. He started the rodeo here in Nevada in 1912, and it's still going today. The Silver State Stampede, the legends live on, and that's coming up, the 111th year of the rodeo.
Wow, and that is a terrific history. We are going to mention that too. This museum, by the way, is at 542 Commercial Street. Free admission. You're a nonprofit.
It's been proven for small museums such as ours and the Folk Life Center across the way that you generate more money through donations, requesting donations at the door where everybody just pays what they can, than paying somebody to collect the admissions. So that's what we do, and it's worked well. We're kind of the king of nonprofits. We are the only museum in town that does not get any sort of tax revenue dollars.
Wow, no line item for the museum.
No, we're not a line item. So we operate on a real tight budget and have a way of making things work. We have a small office that we rent to a local person here who uses it for an office. And then we have our great, great neighbors upstairs, the Nevada Cattlemen Association, who also are very nonprofit. But it's a great blend and mix, the two of us together, and we're in the horsey and cowy business.
Yeah, they get all the visitors to go upstairs to the Nevada Cattlemen's, which that's got to be a spectacular view up there too in this historic building. They get to traipse on through the artifacts that are on display at the museum, which is open 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tuesday through Thursday and Saturday. Those are your hours. You are closed Friday and Sunday, but that makes perfect sense.
We're closed Sunday and Monday.
Oh, Sunday and Monday? Oh, you're open Friday. Okay, I'll have to look up that website and see when the world I found there. But free admission, that's the important thing too.
Closed Sunday and Monday.
Closed Sunday and Monday. So for those of you listening, look up those hours, head downtown. Again, a great location at 542 Commercial Street. And we do want to mention, as Jan was saying, because the Silver State Stampede, the legend lives on. This is a 100 and now 11-year-old event that's been going, if not continuously, almost continuously.
Had a few gaps in its life.
Yeah. But that's the
so
gist
is
of
the
it.
fair.
Exactly. So a lot to be proud of. But the origins of this are really interesting. Again, it dates back to that gentleman that you said kind of he and his bride started their lives all over again, coming from beautiful, warm, sunny California into the northeastern Nevada high desert.
It's a good thing they moved back in June.
Yes, they did, when it was very pleasant. Oh, G.S. Garcia. So he actually founded, I guess, the Silver State Stampede, Jan?
Oh, he did. Rodeos were just starting up in the West. The Pendleton Roundup is somewhat older. The Calgary Stampede, I think, is the granddaddy of them all. And then there's the Cheyenne Frontier Days. Those were the three biggies, but there were lots of regional ones going at the same time. And actually the term buckarees goes back to those early California gold rush days, and a guy named Kilgore wrote in a journal that he observed buckarees who were herdsmen taking care of the cattle on the hillside outside of Sutter's Fort, which is now in Sacramento. So the term buckaree sort of was an Americanized version of vaquero, which is the Spanish cowboy word. So it's no new word that has evolved. Well, it's probably 175 years old at this point. So Mr. Garcia had this vision. He was quite the visionary, and wanted a rodeo to be formed in Elko. There was a traveling troupe called the 101 Ranch, which was out of Oklahoma, and he got part of them to come. This is in 1912, and this whole idea just sort of mushroomed into this grand 3-day event, and they had an Indian band from Hawaii come down and play. People came from all over to attend this event. It was held at the baseball park, which is about where the post office is now. And they had boxing matches.
This was downtown Elko?
Downtown Elko.
Okay, all right.
So they had a boxing match. I don't know what that has to do with the rodeo, but boxing matches were a big deal.
It's big, loud, and noisy.
It's big, loud, and noisy. And then they had a baseball game, baseball tournament going on. And there was a team from Palisade that came and played, and one from Corinne over in Utah on the railroad that came. And Carlin had a team, and I think Eureka came over, and they're all coming on the train to play.
Right, because this is just, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Journey.
So that would be during the day, and then in the evening. And remember, there's no lights then, so that's probably why you had to have it in June when it stayed light as late as possible. They had the rodeo because it had the baseball park had the seating. So I guess they had the actual events in the infield. The bucking contest.
Right there where the downtown corridor is now?
Yeah, where the post office
Pretty much.
is.
Yeah, that's, wow. Well, that's.
And there's a great picture, and you can see some of the houses up on Court Street.
Cool.
You can still identify those. But one of the most spectacular things that he arranged for on this very first 1912 rodeo was he got one of those newfangled flying machines to come in from Oakland. So the pilot shipped it in on a flatbed car on the railroad, and there's something about carburetors that have to be adjusted for altitude,
okay.
And we're right at a mile, and they're at sea level, so it didn't really sputter. It didn't really fly like we think of flying. It sort of sputtered and swooped, and I'm sure everyone in northern Nevada turned out to see this amazing new flying machine.
And how dangerous.
Oh,
wow.
And I would have gone to see it too.
Of course, we would have all been there front row, Jan.
And I was just going through an old album that got loaned to me so I could see a picture of my 1907 house. And I think I have a picture of that airplane.
Wow.
It's just this little tiny dot. It's one of those, you see that little speck, that's an airplane.
Right.
But you can see that it's a biplane.
And you could see that was a ball field / rodeo.
And you can see the railroad track.
Exactly. Oh, wow.
Okay. So people were satisfied that they had seen one of these newfangled flying machines, and this was a big 3-day event. Of course, the hotels were packed, and they were, having people do early Airbnbs and everything else. And he then later, a couple years later, I think 1914, 15, he bought a huge parcel of property where Southside School and Panorama Trailer Park are, and built himself, and he had like 6 kids by then, a Spanish hacienda-looking house down there. Then he built a grandstand that is darn near as big as the one at the fairgrounds now, huge grandstand, and a racetrack, because people in Elko have been racing horses. Well, Elko's really getting going December 29th, 1868. And by that fall of 1869, they were racing horses. Everybody, Tuscarora had a racetrack, Death had a racetrack. And they're racing horses. So this big park of Mr. Garcia's has a half-mile track that is used for racing horses, racing motorcycles in 1915, and those new automobiles with speeds up to 45 miles an hour. I would have just loved to time work back and see it. There's some photographs of these, and they're those old, just barely held together with wood cars that are just amazing to look at. But then, just to make this place even more spectacular, so you've got this half-mile track, and then you've got the bucking chutes and all of that required stuff for a rodeo. He put in a baseball diamond, complete with the outfield.
He loved baseball, it sounds like.
Yeah. And they've been playing baseball since 1869, 70 in Elko too. So he's got this baseball diamond on the infield of the racetrack. So it's Elko's first sports complex, I keep saying.
Jan, I was just thinking that. It's like, wait a minute, we need to remind people currently involved in all of this that we can all get along. Yes.
And then he wanted to start a fair. He attempted to start a fair, but when the Elko Agricultural Association, which is the technical name for the fair board, was formed in, I think, like 1919, they could never agree on a price for his property. And that's when they bought the property up at the China Ranch, as it was called then, where the fairgrounds is now. But he still continued. That was the baseball grounds clear through probably up to World War II.
And now where Southside School is?
Where Southside School is. Mm-hmm. And they had the rodeo there. The last rodeo was in 1938. Mr. Garcia died in 1933. He had terrible health. He'd had a heart attack, and then he had all sorts of kidney issues, and actually he died in Los Angeles. He was getting medical attention down there. Well, then Mrs. Garcia and her sons and the 2 daughters continued living over at their home at the rodeo grounds, and then they closed. They weathered out Prohibition and the Depression. And in late 1938, maybe a little of 39, they closed the store. They shipped all of the inventory to Salinas, which at that time was a huge ranching community, kind of evolving into farming. And they had family there. They opened a store there. And the property just sat empty all those years. And the building was empty for a while. The power company moved in the Elko Lamoille Power Company, moved into the building in 1940. And they were there under 5 different names until 2016.
And then it was time for Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum.
And then they knew the legacy of the building, and NV Energy has a great philanthropic arm to it. And they approached a group of us and said, if you get a 501c3 and the state nonprofit status, we will donate the building for the purpose of a cowboy gear museum. They specifically knew what they wanted it to be.
Jan, that is a great story, and we know it represents so much hard work. And in fact, it's really a legacy of love and in dedication, certainly because Paula Bear Wright had this vision all along.
She had this vision, and we, used to fantasize about it for a long, long time. So then we formed together a board that is John and Susan Wright and Mike and Tana Gallagher, and a representative from the power company, Jay Tubbs, who's since retired and moved to Phoenix, and me. And we're just, it's like anything else like that. It's a team effort. It's not just one big solo person doing all of this. It's like any other project that you do in Elko or anywhere else. It takes multiple people with multiple talents to put all of this together, whether you're doing the Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum or the Western Folklife Center across the way. They're great neighbors, and it's an interesting focus. Their focus, their theme is contemporary Western lifestyles, and our focus is on the old ways. So it gives a lot of life and vibrancy to downtown.
Jan Petersen is the director of the Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum, located at 542 Commercial Street, right there in the heart of downtown Elko. And Jan, all of this history and much more, and beautiful photographs, historical photographs, are all contained within. There are at least 3 books that I'm aware of that you have authored or co-authored, and including the history of the Silver State Stampede Rodeo, the history of G.S. Garcia, and then the latest on the ranching legacy.
Well, and Sid McMullen and I were collaborated with Pete Ellison of Ellison Ranching Company to do this book, and it was like 8 years of collaboration and research, and our husbands got all involved researching stuff. My husband was at the Northeastern Nevada Museum so much he bought his own chair.
That's a great story too. And these books are available locally or at your museum as well?
We've got the Ellison Ranching book, the Empire. You'd think I could never forget the name of it.
The Empire of the Ranch,
yeah,
the Ellison Ranch.
The High Desert Empire.
Thank you.
How awful of me to not know my own stuff. But we've got new books like that are themely. We have to keep within the Western cowboy theme to keep the IRS happy. Mm-hmm. And then we sell used books.
Of which you're looking for donations.
And we're always looking for donations of used books. If you're reluctantly cleaning out shelves, and books are still a hot topic, and they're highly sought after. Those Time Life Western books that I still don't think of as being that old, but young people come in and they see them and, vintage books. Well, they do look vintage, and they are 35 years old, but they're a great resource. And nonfiction books are a great resource. Fiction, those old Will James and Zane Grey ones are they're fun to have and to share. And we've got artwork by James Shoshone and some handmade stuff. We've beautiful jewelry that Rodney Mike from Duckwater makes.
Victoria Jackson's book was just recognized with an award.
I had her bring in 15 books yesterday. So when that book first came out, she brought some in, and I bought one, and I sat down and read it cover to cover.
Wow. It's called The Dying Art of Cowboying. Now, she's taken a lot of photographs. She's an amazing photographer.
She is an amazing photographer, and she does all of the editing herself. She does all the layout herself. She works
super
like
talented.
crazy.
Yeah,
super talented.
She was an editor of a native newspaper for a while. She worked with us at KENB TV.
Yeah,
yep.
yeah.
So
and she knows how to make these stories succinct and brief, but yet she gets all that you need to know into it. So I admire. So when she got this award, I said, well, I'm hardly surprised, and I told you so.
Right. So you can get Victoria Jackson's book at Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum, along with the ones that Sid McMullen and Jan Petersen have collaborated on. You and Sue Abel did the Silver State Stampede 100 Years, the Centennial.
We did.
Did that one together. And then did you collaborate on the G.S. Garcia one?
We did. Paula and I did the
Oh.
Elko part, and Dee Dee Garcia and a friend of hers, Linda Harris, did the California side. And about every 8 weeks, either they would come to us or we would go over to California and work on that. And that's when I learned to scan photos and learn how to be an emailer of stuff.
Yep, new technology. Well, and always looking forward, even though Jan Petersen is a historian and is such a treasure all by herself. Well, the entire Petersen family, you have to know, Jan, you have raised wonderful children who are now all grown with their own children.
They're all grown up.
Yes, but what contributions they make. But looking forward, there are always collaborations and projects and goals and ways that you're continuing to showcase artists and craftspeople and gear makers.
Well, we're all guilty of not being good tourists in our own backyard. We don't realize what a unique place we live in. I recently was helping with Travel Nevada, who were they sponsored these, they're called FAM tours, familiarization tours, and they're for out-of-area people, tour operators, and just travel agents to show them the highlights of our backyard, our great big backyard. So this group was 20 of them, and they were from Australia and Canada and Mexico and Europe, Switzerland and Germany. They were just wowed with what we had to offer. I took them up Lamoille Canyon, and some of them had never seen snow, so there was an avalanche to see. And they were wowed by that. And the flowers in Lamoille Canyon are just almost as spectacular as I've ever seen them.
Oh, breathtaking.
So it was this postcard of pictures of these flowers to take them to see. It was like, ta-da,
Oh.
Here we are. And then we had dinner at the Star, and we took them around downtown to the Folk Life Center. Brad did a great tour over there. And then they came to the Cowboy Arts and Gear, and we took them to Capriola's, and they stayed at the Stockmans, so they got the feel of downtown. Then we took them the next day. We were going to Wells, so I had the bus driver drive through Star Valley.
Oh.
Because they were interested in, these people kept emphasizing, we've seen Las Vegas, we've seen Reno, we've seen Lake Tahoe, and we like that. But we want to see what communities are like. So we drove through Star Valley, and there was a bald eagle obligingly posing for us, and that was great. Then we went up to Angel Lake, which we got, you're winding up, and there's some cows on the road. So we stopped the bus, and it's like this stampede to get off the bus. And there are these cow-calf pairs, and they're posing for these guys.
Because they're not going to get charged like the buffalo would. But
that's
great.
And with the yellow mule's ears in the background and little dots of snow, and it looked like a postcard. Then we got up to Angel Lake, and the ice is just sort of getting mushy and soft. And there was still lots of snow around up there. In fact, the parking, they had cleared off the parking lot, but there was still over in the picnic and campground, there's feet of snow still.
Oh, what a terrific showcase. And they couldn't have had a better tour guide, Jan, seriously. I mean, thank you so much for everything that you do.
It's fun to do. If you don't tell these stories and repeat them, then they just fade away. And, so you have to keep showing and telling people and why they need to come here and come and visit and see what we have to offer. I had someone moving away from Elko say that this was just a desert of culture.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
And
they slipped away, because that's just not true.
And I thought, there's the community orchestra, if you want classical type music. We have the silver stage players. We have the college group. We have all that fun stuff.
The Stage Door was just hosting the humanities
does stuff. So
literature
there is,
event. Yeah.
and
library, and I know
there's all sorts of stuff. There's every sport you wanted, from baseball and basketball and volleyball to those ambitious Canadians. Got their own hockey rink going,
That's right.
complete with Zamboni.
I know, right here, the igloo. And it's all comes from community. It's community built. There's no prescription. There's no, this is how you do it. You get to make your own fun. I've always said that.
It comes from the heart.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, all of this from the heart, and that much more. And of course, talking with Jan Petersen, director of Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum. The museum itself is at 542 Commercial Street. Jan, you sit on numerous boards and advisory committees too, so thank you for that.
Well, I know thank you. And
yeah.
I am a great participant in the Downtown Business Association and a great advocate for that. And we've got our second Saturday wine walks that are a great success, bringing people downtown. And then, of course, we'll have our ghost tours the last 2 weekends in October. I can't remember the dates, but it's the last 2 weekends in October. And then we'll have the Snowflake Festival again.
All over again. And in the meantime, California Trail Advisory Board, you sit on that. California Trail Interpretive Center is open 8 miles west. It's the actual, you can see the Donner, the infamous Hastings cutoff of the Donner Party from that facility. And that'll be another show. I know you're going to come back and talk more about the Rutnuts, the Humboldt High Road Group.
We just
and more.
Finished Trail Days, and it was a fun success. And
yes, absolutely. More to come, right, Jan?
A good time was had by all.
Jan Petersen, our guest today. Thank you so much, listeners, for joining us. And find Jan downtown Elko at 542 Commercial Street. Thank you to all who support Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum. Thank you to the founders, and thank you to the continued supporters of that nonprofit facility right in the heart of downtown Elko.